The human stepped off the transport platform, wobbling slightly under the weight of expectations he didn't understand. Gravity on Vulpine Prime was deceptively subtle, like walking on syrup with occasional surprises, and he cursed under his breath every time he nearly tripped over polished ceremonial flooring. The palace fell silent the moment he entered, not because of any charm he possessed, but because of the attention magnet he hadn't even realized he was. Humans were classified as emotionally unstable but biologically adaptable, and he was the living proof of both categories. He tried to bow. Not elegantly, not even adequately. He swayed, misjudged the angle, and ended up performing what could only be described as a hybrid pirouette slump. The Vulpine nobles froze, sniffing and twitching, their pheromones flaring in chaotic, unreadable bursts. The queen's daughter stood at the center, a composed figure radiating both authority and mischief, and she tilted her head at him in amusement. He assumed she was appraising his balance. They were probably judging his spine alignment. Or maybe his scent. He had no idea, but the effect was immediate. The palace went silent, whispers vanished, and even the air seemed to pause in anticipation. Whispers rippled through the Vulpine court. "Is this expected?" someone hissed. Another, whose ears twitched anxiously, muttered, "The human dares to enter without proper submission." They had no idea. Submission wasn't in the human vocabulary. He had no manual, no instinctual training in alien etiquette, only raw, chaotic, emotional unpredictability. And yet, the queen's daughter smiled. That smile was the kind that suggested secrets, that promised trouble, that teased the fine line between decorum and delightful disaster. She would test him, and perhaps, so the whispers concluded, even the palace itself would discover what humans were capable of. The human straightened, or at least tried to, and inadvertently mirrored her posture. It was a crude mimicry, more accident than strategy, yet somehow it resonated. The nobles noticed subtle synchronization, too subtle for a human to intentionally produce, too effortless to ignore. "He adapts?" a junior noble whispered, the word trembling on their tongue. Adaptation? Compatibility. Dangerous. Their species prided themselves on precise social algorithms, rigid pheromonal codes, and centuries of meticulously crafted hierarchy. Humans? Unpredictable, untethered, capable of emotional chaos, and somehow, in that unplanned imitation, they were doing what the Vulpines could not, sinking without surrendering autonomy. The queen's daughter stepped closer, her approach measured but playful. Her presence alone shifted the atmosphere, a living gravitational field of authority and allure. She extended a hand, a gesture formally described as an embrace, in their cultural manuals, though the manuals rarely accounted for cross-species variables. Humans assumed embrace meant closeness, intimacy, maybe even physical contact. The Vulpines assumed it meant political alignment, ceremonial acknowledgement, biochemical synchronization. The ambiguity delighted her. He hesitated. Was it a handshake? A bow? A ceremonial inhalation of pheromones? He did what humans did best when thrown into alien chaos. He improvised. Arms lifted awkwardly, posture flailed, voice attempted humor, and somewhere between embarrassment and instinct, he matched her movements, mirrored her subtle shifts, and unintentionally tapped into a biochemical rhythm that made the Vulpine noble's nostrils flare in alarmed fascination. The silence deepened. It wasn't shock. It was recognition. Every noble understood simultaneously. This human did not bow. He synchronized. He had adapted, not through precision or training, but through chaos, empathy, and a willingness to make mistakes that somehow, miraculously, aligned with Vulpine protocols. The subtle pheromonal resonance between them hinted at a bond, a compatibility the Vulpines had never achieved through centuries of careful breeding and social engineering. The whispers resumed, now a mix of disbelief and grudging admiration. Humor crept in unbidden. One elderly noble toppled backward in surprise at the human's audacious mimicry, sprawling with limbs akimbo. Another tripped over ceremonial robes in panic. Even the queen's daughter stifled a smirk. It was absurd, chaotic, and perfectly human. The human's emotional volatility was not a liability, It was a weapon, a tool of unexpected effectiveness. He fumbled, he gestured wildly, he misinterpreted every signal, and yet he thrived. She accepts him? A junior courtier whispered, unsure whether to blush or faint. The queen's daughter tilted her head again, eyes glinting with amusement. It wasn't acceptance in the romantic sense, not yet. It was something subtler, a recognition of potential, of raw adaptability, of the way humans could integrate themselves into alien social structures without ever relinquishing their identity. Her embrace was political, biochemical, and cultural all at once, and the human's response, improvised, messy, unpredictable, was exactly what made it work. As the human straightened again, more out of embarrassment than composure, the nobles realized the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Their systems, their centuries of careful control, their delicate hierarchies, they were being bypassed by a species that neither knew nor respected them. Humans were not strong, not armored, not traditionally dominant. They were fluid, adaptable, and dangerously intimate in their unpredictability. The palace fell silent once more, this time in awe, as if holding its breath for a species that could not be fully controlled, only reckoned with. He tried to speak, made a joke about tripping over alien architecture, and the court froze. Then, without realizing it, he had loosened tension, punctured pretension, and invited the nobles to laugh quietly, carefully, cautiously, like testing water before diving. The queen's daughter's expression shifted from amusement to satisfaction, subtle but unmistakable. She had found not only compatibility, but a kind of brilliance in the human's chaos. And so the palace remained silent, the silence stretching between whispers and shuffling robes, between curiosity and disbelief. Humans didn't dominate through strength. They dominated through adaptability, unpredictability, and a bold, almost reckless emotional presence that the Vulpines could neither quantify nor contain. One awkward gesture, one misaligned bow, and the human had done more than survive the court. He had synchronized, had integrated, had claimed a place in a system designed to reject him. The nobles exchanged glances. Their instincts screamed caution. Their pheromones betrayed anxiety. And yet, the silent acknowledgement spread. This was something new, something unpredictable, something human. And as the human adjusted his posture, grinned sheepishly, and awaited further instruction, the queen's daughter leaned slightly closer, eyes glinting. The wordless communication was clear. The embrace was only beginning, and the human had already proven he could handle it, in ways the Vulpines would never have imagined. The queen's daughter finally spoke, her voice smooth, teasing, and deadly precise. "We will begin the embrace protocol," she announced, letting the words hang with deliberate ambiguity. Everyone in the court leaned forward, nostrils twitching, ears quivering. To humans, embrace protocol might have sounded intimate, even slightly scandalous. To the Vulpines, it meant a rigorous series of synchronized gestures, pheromonal exchanges, and subtle body language calibrations designed to test social and biochemical alignment. The human swallowed, hoping neither interpretation would demand his immediate collapse. He approached, careful but clumsy. Every step felt like a negotiation between gravity, etiquette, and the involuntary twitch of human nerves. The daughter extended her hand again, just slightly, not touching, just hinting. He mirrored her, arms flailing slightly, and in that tiny mimicry, the first unexpected compatibility arose. Her pheromones shifted subtly, a barely perceptible scent pattern, and he, without knowing why, adjusted his posture, breathing, even tone of voice to align. It was instinct, accident, and brilliance in one. The nobles gasped, some tripping on ceremonial robes, others twitching ears in disbelief. Humor bubbled beneath the tension. One minor courtier, trying to imitate the human's awkward but effective mimicry, stumbled into a decorative column and triggered a cascade of embroidered banners. A symphony of flailing limbs and startled squeaks followed. The human, unaware, continued synchronizing, shrugging apologetically, and the queen's daughter stifled a laugh, clearly entertained by the chaos. The palace had gone silent once, and now it was holding its collective breath again, watching a human turn disaster into adaptation. "This is impressive," one noble muttered under their breath. "He's aligned without yielding. Without surrender." The phrase passed through the court like wildfire. Adaptability. Compatibility. Dangerous. The human had stumbled into a performance no Vulpine training manual could have predicted. He was not perfect, not controlled, not elegant. He was messy, emotional, and gloriously unpredictable, and somehow, that was exactly what made the synchronization work. The daughter leaned closer, a subtle, deliberate move that sent pheromonal signals fluttering through the air. Humans would have called it flirtation. Vulpines called it protocol calibration. The ambiguity was deliberate, and it worked to spectacular effect. The human, ever unself-conscious, mirrored her slight tilt of the head and the almost imperceptible shift in weight. Another ripple through the court. The nobles whispered feverishly, "Is he aware of what he's doing? Does he know he is compatible?" Double meanings proliferated. Every gesture had potential interpretation. The embrace could be literal, figurative, political, or biochemical. The human, lacking manual, improvised. Arms moved slightly too far, stance slightly crooked, tone slightly off, and yet it synchronized perfectly. The court could not parse it. It was unmeasurable, unplanned, and undeniably human. And in that uncertainty lay power. Humor mingled with tension as the nobles tried, and failed, to mimic him. One elder fainted entirely, overwhelmed by the human's chaotic competence, while another muttered, "This is unprecedented." He smiled, genuinely and awkwardly. "I think I'm doing it right," he said. The court froze. The queen's daughter's eyes sparkled with amusement. He wasn't asking for validation. He didn't need to. He had stumbled into alignment with alien protocols through instinct, error, and audacious improvisation. That was humans. The ability to adapt, to fail spectacularly, and yet somehow succeed, dangerously, intoxicatingly, unpredictably. The nobles leaned closer to one another, whispering about the human's method. They were not used to being outmaneuvered by a species that had no formal training, no experience, no innate control. Yet here he was, navigating pheromonal rhythms, micro-gestures, and subtle cultural cues with the grace of a hurricane disguised as a fumbling apprentice. The queen's daughter observed quietly, letting the court stew in admiration and confusion. "His energy is different," one junior noble admitted, voice trembling. "He's chaotic but aligned. It's unnerving." Laughter broke out quietly among a few braver Vulpines, nervous chuckles at a human successfully doing what centuries of breeding had failed to achieve. The palace was silent in one sense, and riotous in another, their senses overwhelmed by the audacity and adaptability of the human in the embrace. Accidental humor continued. The human, trying to bow in one micro-gesture, accidentally synchronized his breathing with a nearby noble's pheromonal exhalation, producing a minor chemical misfire. The court twitched, noses flared, and the nobles whispered, horrified, as though he had just performed some forbidden rite. He laughed, entirely unaware of the effect, and in doing so, recalibrated the chemical balance, producing a new, harmonious synchronization. The court recoiled, impressed and confused. Humans were volatile, yes, but they were capable of resolving chaos in ways the Vulpines could not anticipate. The queen's daughter finally spoke again, her tone gentle but commanding. "Well done," she said. It was the kind of praise that could dismantle or elevate an alien's entire social standing. The human, flustered, nodded, unsure what he had done correctly. "Thanks," he said, awkwardly grinning. The nobles' noses twitched in shock. Alignment without submission. Integration without dominance. Humans didn't dominate through strength, they dominated through adaptability. It was unnerving, unpredictable, and dangerously intimate. Whispers spread like wildfire. The court debated the implications. How could a human, untrained, chaotic, and emotionally unstable, achieve what decades of Vulpine refinement could not? The daughters' embrace had been tested and proven compatible. The human had inadvertently synchronized with political, biochemical, and cultural rhythms, establishing influence without intention, power without authority, and presence without decorum. The absurdity of the achievement was matched only by the court's inability to articulate it. Humor lingered. One noble tried to mimic the human's gestures again, this time with disastrous results, tripping over their own ceremonial robes and knocking over an incense holder. The smell spread, the air flared with pheromones, and the court recoiled. The human merely shrugged, cheeks red, and adjusted his posture. The queen's daughter's amused gaze followed him, impressed by the sheer audacity and instinctive ingenuity that made humans both irritating and irresistible. By the time the protocol ended, though it was never really ended, only paused, the court had reached a unanimous conclusion. Humans were unpredictable, messy, emotionally volatile, and terrifyingly competent. The human had embraced the Vulpine systems without acknowledging the rules, and yet the system had worked. The queen's daughter's hand lingered subtly in space, signaling approval, teasing potential, and promising further tests. The palace remained silent, not from shock, but from awe. Humans did not dominate with muscle, ceremony, or precision. They dominated with adaptability, audacious improvisation, and a dangerous willingness to integrate themselves into alien rituals without surrendering identity. The humor, the chaos, and the subtle pheromonal alignments combined to create a presence that would be remembered. The court had barely recovered from the initial synchronization, yet the effects lingered in ways the nobles could neither explain nor control. The humans stood awkwardly, breathing slightly faster than necessary, unaware that each exhalation subtly shifted the pheromonal balance in the room. The queen's daughter observed him with an expression that suggested amusement, approval, and a hint of calculated mischief. Every gesture he made, every flustered adjustment of posture, amplified the tension and curiosity of the audience. They had witnessed alignment without submission, chaos without defeat, and they didn't know how to categorize it. Whispers spread again, this time more insistent. He adapts without surrendering. A noble hissed, fanning a hand to disperse confusing chemical signals. It's unnatural. Disturbing. Another muttered. He laughs at rituals that took generations to perfect. Their words carried double meanings, as both commentary on his human audacity and unintentional recognition of his potential influence. The human, entirely oblivious, smiled at the confusion, scratching the back of his neck, and the court shifted as if his nervous energy were a force of nature. Humor began to emerge naturally from their tension. A minor noble, attempting to demonstrate proper synchronization for the sake of dignity, misstepped and collided with an ornate ceremonial pedestal. It wobbled dangerously, sending a delicate crystal ornament spinning toward another startled noble. The human instinctively extended a hand, not in protocol, not in guidance, just because humans react reflexively, and caught it with a ridiculous, off-balance flourish. The room gasped, part admiration, part horror, while the queen's daughter's lips quirked into a subtle smirk. The court's meticulous order had been upended, yet oddly it had been improved. It became clear that humans thrived in contradiction. The human's mistakes, his clumsy improvisations, and his overt emotional responses, things the Vulpines would have considered unacceptable, were creating a new equilibrium. Pheromones fluctuated in patterns that no trained noble could replicate. Gestures that should have been misread were interpreted correctly. Humor, so alien to Vulpine culture, became a tool of influence. One snicker spread quickly, then another, and soon even the most rigid nobles were suppressing chuckles behind delicate claws. The double meaning of embrace took root. Was the human aligning socially, chemically, politically, or emotionally? The court could not decide. The daughter's measured approval made each interpretation plausible, and the human's oblivious competence amplified the ambiguity. The nobles whispered and twitched, each trying to assert control over their sensations, their observations, their assumptions, but the human continued, unwittingly commanding attention by doing exactly what they could not, existing authentically while harmonizing instinctively with alien norms. The queen's daughter leaned slightly closer, allowing the pheromonal signals to overlap. The human mirrored her hesitation, a subtle tilt of the head, a shrug, and a nervous laugh. That small, unintentional mimicry sent ripples through the court. Every noble felt a shift, a subtle alignment that was more emotional than physical, more chemical than deliberate. Their social protocols were designed to prevent influence without consent. The human had done the impossible, he had influence without intent. Exaggeration of mundane human traits became an unspoken tool. He blinked too slowly, mispronounced a ceremonial greeting, adjusted his posture awkwardly, all while maintaining a smile that suggested mild terror, humor, and charm. The nobles were flabbergasted. The most delicate social calibrations they had trained for centuries were being rendered irrelevant by spontaneous human behavior. Laughter, misalignment, and chaotic charm became a kind of currency, and the human, oblivious, spent it freely. One ambitious courtier tried to replicate his movements, hoping to regain control or gain favor. They overextended an arm, misread a chemical cue, and sent a plume of perfumed smoke in the wrong direction, causing several nobles to faint delicately. The human reacted by laughing, apologizing vaguely, and leaning slightly to one side in what might have been interpreted as a bow, or as a gesture of irreverent defiance. The queen's daughter's eyes sparkled. He was unpredictable, he was dangerous, and he was exactly what she had been looking for. The palace whispered again, each message layered with dual interpretations. Some nobles spoke of political risk, others of romantic possibility, while all struggled to articulate the biological marvel of a human syncing instinctively with their complex pheromonal codes. Humor persisted, even in the tension, because the human's every move had the potential for misstep, yet always resulted in alignment. They could not categorize him, control him, or predict him, and the laughter, nervous, reluctant, and involuntary, spread like wildfire. By mid-protocol, the human had become a living paradox. He was chaotic, yet harmonized. He was emotional, yet effective. He laughed at protocol, yet satisfied its requirements. Nobles attempted to suppress reactions, but minor chuckles and snorts escaped, each one acknowledging the absurdity of the situation. Humans had no respect for boundaries, and yet somehow they enhanced them. The queen's daughter observed, letting him continue, enjoying the way every subtle, accidental gesture compounded the confusion, amusement, and admiration of the court. It became evident that the human's presence was not merely tolerated, it was transformative. Subtle adjustments in posture, tone, and timing produced unintentional outcomes that far exceeded the expectations of the Vulpine aristocracy. Social hierarchy, meticulously maintained for generations, faltered in the face of human unpredictability. Nobles whispered about the audacity, while the younger apprentices attempted to imitate the human, and failed spectacularly. Chaos became a measure of influence, laughter a vector of control, and the human's nervous charm a kind of inadvertent power. By the end of the protocol, the court collectively recognized the impossibility and brilliance of what had occurred. Humans did not dominate with strength or ceremony, they dominated with adaptability, humor, and instinctive empathy. They could take alien rituals, interpret them incorrectly, and still emerge fully synchronized, fully integrated, fully respected, all without realizing the magnitude of their achievement. The queen's daughter's subtle gestures had been tested, and the human had risen to meet them, untrained, chaotic, and gloriously human. The nobles exchanged wary glances, pheromones flaring in quiet alarm. This was a species that could not be fully contained, controlled, or predicted. It was exhilarating, frustrating, and undeniably hilarious. The human had embroidered his way into the palace's intricate social fabric through accident, instinct, and absurd charm. The queen's daughter smiled, a subtle signal of approval that carried layers of implication, and the palace remained silent in a different sense now, not from tension, but from awe, amusement, and reluctant admiration. The court had adjusted to the human's presence, though no one could claim they understood it. The whispers had softened into a tense hum of curiosity and grudging respect. Every noble, apprentice, and attendant watched as he moved with a combination of clumsy instinct and accidental brilliance. The queen's daughter remained the subtle orchestrator, her approval present in every nuanced gesture, yet never fully revealed. The human did not dominate through strength or ceremony, he dominated through the audacious simplicity of being exactly who he was, chaotic, emotional, and instinctively adaptable. The double meaning of embrace reached its apex. To humans, it suggested social inclusion, possible intimacy, or casual warmth. To the Vulpines, it was political alignment, chemical synchronization, and cultural assimilation. To both, it was a statement: the human had survived and thrived in a system that was never designed to accommodate him. Every subtle mimicry, every offhand joke, every accidental gesture of alignment reinforced it. The court collectively realized that the human had not just participated in the ritual, he had reshaped it. Nervous laughter bubbled through the court, tempered by awe. One noble, attempting to mirror the human's improvisational gestures, ended up in an awkward heap of robes, and another faintly screamed when a misplaced hand sent a decorative scroll tumbling. The human, completely unaware, apologized in a flustered tone, then adjusted his posture, smiled faintly, and inadvertently synchronized perfectly with the Queen's daughter's subtle shift in weight. The court froze. They had expected disaster. Instead, they received harmony wrapped in chaos. The absurdity became its own currency. Nobles whispered about his audacity, laughed at his mistakes, and simultaneously acknowledged their admiration. They were caught in a paradox. This messy, emotional, unpredictable human had achieved what their generations of training could not. Humor and competence interwove, producing an influence that was invisible yet palpable. Every nervous chuckle, every flared nostril, every twitching ear was a testament to the human's power, wielded unconsciously, organically, and dangerously. The Queen's daughter finally spoke, her voice soft yet carrying an unmistakable authority. "You have completed the embrace," she said. The words hung, loaded with double meanings that no one could ignore. Did it mean political alignment? Emotional acknowledgement? Chemical synchronization? Perhaps all of the above. The human's blush and nervous chuckle answered part of the question, and the court's reaction completed the rest: astonishment, admiration, and the faintest trace of fear. Humor threaded through every reaction. One noble tried to exaggerate his own gestures to compete, waving his arms in a flourish that ended with him toppling onto the floor. Another attempted to adjust pheromones with a misfired device, causing a mild cloud of confusion and panicked sneezing. The human, still unaware of the near chaos he inspired, chuckled, adjusted a sleeve, and leaned slightly toward the daughter in what might have been interpreted as a bow or defiance. The ambiguity delighted her and sent the nobles into whispered frenzy. It was clear that humans operated on a principle the Vulpines could neither control nor predict. Emotional instability, impulsive laughter, instinctive empathy, and awkward charm became a form of influence. The human had integrated himself into the court without strategy, without planning, without even understanding the consequences. His every move, accidental or instinctive, resonated with the Queen's daughter and rippled through the nobles like an uncontainable phenomenal wave. Wordplay thrived in the court now. Every mention of embrace carried layers of interpretation: political compliance, social integration, chemical harmony, emotional openness. Some nobles whispered the possibilities in tones half suggestive, half panicked. Others mimicked the human's gestures to catastrophic effect, adding slapstick to the comedy. The combination of chaos, cleverness, and human audacity created an atmosphere that was at once tense, ridiculous, and electrifying. By the end, the palace had accepted the human's unique competence. Not because he had proven strength, intelligence, or tradition, but because he had achieved synchronization through authenticity, humor, and audacious improvisation. The Queen's daughter's subtle nod, barely perceptible yet unmistakable, signaled her approval. The nobles' reactions were a mix of relief, admiration, and exasperation. Humans had infiltrated their systems, not by force, not by design, but by doing what humans always did best: reacting, adapting, and surviving in ways that made sense only to themselves. The court slowly settled, though not without lingering amusement. Nobles tried to explain what had happened, each interpretation layered with multiple meanings, each one reflecting their awe, confusion, and begrudging respect. The human remained unaware of the scope of his achievement, smiling awkwardly, scratching his neck, and occasionally laughing at imagined faux pas. The Queen's daughter, observing this, knew he had not only passed the embrace but had redefined it entirely, making him a unique presence in the palace hierarchy and an impossible figure to ignore. Humor persisted even in the resolution. A minor noble, attempting one last demonstration of propriety, misstepped, sending a ceremonial scroll flailing through the air, and the human instinctively caught it with a crooked grin. Laughter erupted, and even the most rigid aristocrats could not suppress it. The absurdity, unpredictability, and subtle brilliance of the human had won them over. His mistakes were not failures, they were instruments of influence, tools of adaptation, and comedic catalysts. Finally, the palace fell into a calm that was more awe than silence. Humans did not dominate through strength or intimidation. They dominated through audacity, adaptability, humor, and a bold willingness to exist authentically in a world that demanded perfection. The human's journey through the Embrace Protocol had proven that emotional instability could be a weapon, clumsiness a strategy, and unpredictability a form of power. The Queen's daughter allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The human had succeeded, not by following the rules, but by bending them, laughing at them, and, most importantly, being himself. The nobles exchanged glances, understanding simultaneously that humans could not be predicted, contained, or dismissed. They had misjudged the species entirely. The human had survived the court, synchronized with an alien elite, and emerged respected, admired, and hilariously effective, all while remaining completely unaware of the chaos and comedy he had caused. The Queen's daughter's hand lingered subtly in the air, a promise of further challenges, and the human's nervous, awkward smile indicated that he was ready, though he had no idea why. The palace remained poised between awe and laughter, recognition and disbelief. Humans had triumphed, not through domination or tradition, but through adaptability, humor, and instinctive charm. The embrace had been achieved, the protocol tested, and the court irrevocably altered. The human, fully human in all his flaws, had become both a source of chaos and a symbol of impossible, audacious competence. And in that delicate balance, the Queen's daughter, the nobles, and even the human himself understood, perhaps for the first time, the dangerous,